I'm going to do a video this week on bolting for caving, but before I get into those details, I want to talk on a high level about safety and conservation. When it comes to the impacts of setting bolts in caves, I think there's a lot of confusion out there that carries over from places like the climbing and canyoneering communities where they have their own set of ethics around bolts. There have been many bolt wars in those communities over the years, and some of that's trickled over into the caving community. As far as the ecological impacts of placing bolts in caves, there's essentially no impact on the cave environment or cave life. It's purely a human aesthetic impact. Some of the issues with bolts in the climbing community and canyoneering communities have been the result of over-bolting and the use of excessive numbers of bolts, placing bolts where they aren't needed. Certainly if there are good natural anchors in caves, those should be used in favor of bolts. But in many cases, those natural anchors aren't in the right place, aren't easy to use, and may have hazards associated with their use. My goal with these videos is not to encourage over-bolting. Rather, if bolts are needed, to show you the right way to place them and the right hardware to use so that you minimize the impacts and maximize the safety associated with their use. There are many different types of bolts. Here's some examples. The one on the left here is a GlueIn bolt. It's designed to be used with adhesive. These next three here are wedge bolts. These are all stainless steel. This is what's called a double wedge. It's made by a company called Fix. Fix is single wedge here, and this is a Powers wedge bolt. Many companies make bolts like this, including Hilti. The next two bolts over here are examples of sleeve bolts. This one's a Fix triplex bolt, which has a stainless steel sleeve and then a bolt that goes inside of that. And then another type of sleeve bolt is this is generically referred to as a 5-piece bolt. Used to be made by a company called Rawl, and they've been acquired by Fix, but it's a type of sleeve bolt. And then the last type on the right is a SelfDrive. These are made by Petzl, and they use a special driver, and they have an integrated drill bit. Before we get into talking about different types of bolts, let's talk about metallurgy. So there's most bolts are steel. There's a few exceptions to that, but there's different types of steel. Regular mild steel will rust easily, and so most mild steel bolts are zinc coated, and there's different types of zinc coating, but generically you can think of these as plated steel bolts. The one on the right here, both the hanger and the bolt here are zinc plated. Another term for this is galvanized, and there's different methods for adding the zinc plating. There's electroplating techniques and hot dip methods and so on, but the idea is you take mild steel, coat it with zinc, and then the zinc provides some corrosion protection. The bolt on the left here is stainless steel. This one happens to be 304 stainless, which is a pretty standard grade, and it's inherently corrosion resistant. There are also, for marine applications, 3/16 stainless, which has a higher level of corrosion protection, but it's usually not necessary for cave environments. And in extreme cases where you have climbing areas near the ocean, may require things like titanium GlueIn bolts be used instead of stainless steel. But for cave applications, stainless steel is generally going to be corrosion resistant. Anything that's zinc coated, like the bolt on the right, has some potential for getting scratched and eventually corroding, and I don't recommend this for use in cave applications. It's better to use stainless steel and have corrosion resistance throughout. Whatever metal you use, you need to match the different components. So the bolt, the nut, the hanger, washer, things like mullions should all be made of the same metal. So if it's a plated steel bolt like this, then the hanger should also be plated steel. So stainless steel bolt, then the hanger should be stainless steel, and so on. For cave anchors, we should always be using stainless steel hardware. The better corrosion resistance means better safety, and it also means long term that it's better for the cave in terms of conservation because bolts don't need to be replaced as often. First type of bolt I'm going to talk about is a wedge bolt, and there's different varieties. They come in different diameters and lengths, and there's slightly different designs. But the idea is that you have a threaded bolt with a tapered region on the end, and then you have a wedge or a clip that expands to push against the walls of the hole when the nut is tightened. Some of the nice things about wedge bolts, they tend to be pretty widely available from a lot of different manufacturers and sources. They come in a wide range of lengths and diameters for different types of applications. They tend to be relatively inexpensive. So stainless steel wedge bolts, you can get them for less than $2 a piece. The most expensive ones might be as much as $7 or $8, but they can be found at a fairly low cost. Plated steel versions of these bolts can be had for under $1 a piece. Other advantages of wedge bolts, they tend to be pretty easy to place, and they have fairly high strength. So a 3/8 inch by 3-inch bolt, something like this Powers bolt here, in good quality rock is rated to around 5,000 pounds. So pretty close to the strength of an 11mm static rope. The bolts shown here are all examples of sleeve bolts, different varieties. The two on the left are made by Fix and are the triplex bolts. The one on the right is a 5-piece, what was once made by Rawl and is now made by Powers. And these have good strength. One of the advantages of them is that they're removable. So if there's a need to replace them at some point due to corrosion, or if you rig a drop and then decide to de-rig it later, you can remove these bolts. The Fix triplex, the two on the left here, are also reusable, so they can be removed from a hole and then placed again. And so those are some of the advantages, but these tend to be higher cost. They're typically in the $5 to $10 range. The Fix triplex bolts take a special 12mm drill bit, so the 12mm diameter. That's close to 1/2 inch, but it's a little bit different. And if you use a 1/2 inch drill bit, the hole will be a little bit too large and they won't tighten up properly. This is a special type of bolt called a glue-in, and you drill a slightly oversized hole and then fill it about halfway with a 2-part adhesive, usually acrylic or epoxy, and then place the bolt in there and allow the adhesive to cure. These are nice because they are fairly resistant to weather conditions, so if there's freeze-thaw action, they're less prone to getting loose over time, and they tend to last a long time, so they are typically can be used in service for 100 years or more. Other advantages of glue-in bolts is they're less likely to be stolen. So if you, again, I like to use them in entrances, both because they're resistant to the effects of changing weather conditions, but also they're harder for people to steal. You can't steal the hangers or remove them easily. But that's also part of the downside, is that these types of bolts are not easily removed or replaced. Another downside of glue-in bolts is because you have to wait for the glue to cure. If you're using these for in-cave drops, once they're placed, you can't use them right away. They have to, in most cases, it takes about 24 hours for the adhesive to fully set. So if you're exploring a cave, these aren't a good option because you have to wait to use them, and you're better off using a mechanical bolt like a wedge bolt or a sleeve bolt. This bolt is generically referred to as a self-drive. Sometimes people refer to them as spits, and basically it's a sleeve bolt where the end of the sleeve has these teeth, and it's designed to be used with a driver and a hammer, and you use the sleeve itself to drill the hole, and then once it's drilled to the right depth, you remove it and place this wedge in the end, put it back in the hole, and then hammer it down until it's expanded the sleeve and holds it in place. And then you use these special hangers that screw into the end of the bolt, and that forms your bolt anchor. These are very lightweight setup, and you don't need a power drill necessarily to place these, and so they're good for use in exploration, but they aren't the best choice for permanent rigging. These hangers are made of aluminum, which is good for weight savings, but they are They are susceptible to corrosion if left in a cave for long periods of time. And because the hanger and the bolt and the sleeve are made of different metals, when exposed to moisture, they can be susceptible to galvanic corrosion. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the like button. Subscribe if you aren't already, so you can learn about other videos on the subject of caving, and comment below to let me know how I'm doing or to suggest other caving related topics.